Maya Coleman thought she knew what betrayal looked like until the night her own father destroyed the life of the man who saved her. When her brakes failed on that rain-soaked curve, Evan Brooks risked everything to pull her from death's grip, but Arthur Coleman saw only a threat to his family's reputation. What Arthur didn't know was that the real danger had been lurking in plain sight, wearing a charming smile and holding the spare key to his daughter's heart. As Maya uncovered the shocking truth about who really wanted her dead, she would have to choose between the safety of silence and the courage to expose a web of lies that reached deeper than anyone imagined. But sometimes the greatest betrayal comes from those we trust most, and sometimes the only way to find justice is to risk losing everything you've ever known. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're from, because this story of love, lies, and redemption will leave you questioning everyone's motives until the very last moment. The rain came down hard that September evening, turning County Road 9 into a slick ribbon of trouble. Maya Coleman gripped her steering wheel tighter as her sedan climbed the winding hill just outside town. The wipers fought against the downpour, but they were losing the battle. She was already late getting home from her shift at the hospital. As the operations coordinator, Maya often stayed past her scheduled hours to make sure everything ran smoothly. Tonight had been especially busy in the emergency room, and she'd helped Riley Chen, her best friend and an ER nurse, handle the overflow of patients. The curve ahead looked sharper in the rain. Maya pressed her brake pedal to slow down for the turn. Nothing happened. Her foot went all the way to the floor. The brake pedal felt soft and spongy, like stepping on a wet sponge. Her heart jumped into her throat as the car picked up speed on the downhill slope. "No, no, no," she whispered, pumping the brake pedal harder. Still nothing. The sedan started to slide sideways on the wet pavement. Maya fought to keep control, but the car was moving too fast. She could see the guardrail rushing toward her through the rain-streaked windshield. Just when she thought she might crash, bright headlights appeared in her rearview mirror. A pickup truck was coming up fast behind her, hazard lights flashing. The truck pulled up alongside her car, and she could see a man in the driver's seat motioning for her to roll down her window. "Your brakes!" he shouted over the rain. "Put it in low gear. I'm going to help slow you down." Maya had never tried anything like this before, but she didn't have a choice. She shifted into a lower gear and felt the engine start to slow the car. The pickup truck moved in front of her and let her sedan bump gently against its rear bumper. Slowly, carefully, the stranger used his truck to guide her car to a stop on the grassy shoulder. Maya's hands were shaking so hard, she could barely turn off the engine. The man from the truck was already at her door, rain dripping from his baseball cap. He looked to be about 30, with kind blue eyes and work clothes that were getting soaked. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentle but urgent. Maya tried to answer, but her voice came out as a whisper. She was shivering, though she wasn't sure if it was from the cold or the fear. "I'm Evan," the man said. "Evan Brooks. I work at Arthur's auto shop in town. We need to get you checked out. Do you have someone I can call?" "Riley," Maya managed to say. "Riley Chen. She's a nurse at the hospital." Evan nodded and pulled out his phone. While he made the call, Maya noticed how calm he was. His hands were steady, and he spoke clearly to Riley, explaining what had happened and where they were. "She's on her way," Evan said, ending the call. He opened the back door of his truck and pulled out a dry blanket. "Here, wrap this around yourself. The ambulance will be here soon." "I don't need an ambulance," Maya protested weakly. "Maybe not," Evan said with a small smile. "But it's better to be safe. You just went through something scary." As they waited, Evan stayed with her, making sure she was warm and talking to keep her calm. He told her about his job at the auto shop and how he'd been driving home from picking up parts when he saw her car start to slide. "You saved my life," Maya said, looking at him through the blanket. Evan shook his head. "You kept your head and did exactly what you needed to do. That took courage." When the ambulance arrived, Maya squeezed Evan's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, watching as the EMTs helped her into the ambulance. As it pulled away into the night, Evan stood in the rain, hoping she would be okay. 40 minutes later, Maya sat on an examination table in the emergency room where she worked every day. It felt strange to be a patient in her own workplace. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright, and the smell of disinfectant made her feel dizzy. Riley bustled around the room, checking Maya's blood pressure and asking questions in her professional nurse voice. But Maya could see the worry in her friend's dark eyes. "Your vitals look good," Riley said. "No signs of injury, but Dr. Martinez wants to run a few tests to be sure." The doors to the trauma bay swung open, and Maya's father, Arthur Coleman, rushed in. At 56, Arthur was still an imposing man. He owned the largest auto repair shop in town and had a reputation for being tough but fair. Tonight, though, he looked scared. "Maya," he hurried to her side. "I got here as fast as I could. Riley called me from the ambulance." "I'm okay, Dad," Maya said, though her voice still shook a little. Arthur's face was tight with worry and anger. "What happened? How did your brakes just fail like that?" Before Maya could answer, there was a knock on the doorframe. Evan Brooks stood there, still damp from the soul. Rain, holding his baseball cap in his hands. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said quietly. "The EMT asked me to come in and give details about what happened." Arthur looked at Evan for the first time. Maya watched her father's expression change as he took in Evan's appearance. The work clothes, the calloused hands, the respectful way he waited to be invited in. "You're the one who helped my daughter?" Arthur asked. "Yes, sir. Evan Brooks." He stepped forward and offered his hand. Arthur shook it firmly. "Arthur Coleman, Maya's father." Maya saw recognition flash in Evan's eyes. Arthur Coleman owned Arthur's Auto and Tire, the shop where Evan worked. But if Evan was surprised to learn his boss was Maya's father, he didn't show it. "Can you tell me exactly what happened?" Arthur asked. Evan described the incident clearly and simply. He explained how Maya's car had started to slide on the curve, how he'd helped slow her down, and how well she'd handled a frightening situation. "She was brave," Evan said, glancing at Maya. "A lot of people would have panicked, but she listened and did exactly what needed to be done." Arthur nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said. "I don't know how to repay you for this." "No need, sir," Evan replied. "I'm just glad she's safe." Dr. Martinez arrived then to take Maya for her scans. Arthur walked with them toward the imaging department, leaving Evan standing alone in the trauma bay. As they disappeared around the corner, Arthur turned back to Evan. "We'll talk tomorrow," he said. His voice was hard to read, and Evan couldn't tell if that was good or bad. Evan nodded and made his way back to the parking lot. The rain had finally stopped, but puddles reflected the hospital's bright lights. He climbed into his truck and sat for a moment, thinking about the evening. Maya Coleman, Arthur Coleman's daughter. Evan had worked for Arthur for almost 2 years, and he'd never mentioned having a daughter who worked at the hospital. Then again, Arthur wasn't the type to share personal details with his employees. Evan started his truck and headed home to the small house he shared with his Uncle Walt. He had a feeling tomorrow was going to be an interesting day. The next morning came too soon. Evan arrived at Arthur's Auto and Tire at 7:30, 15 minutes early as always. He liked the quiet time before the shop got busy, when he could organize his tools and plan out the day's work. Uncle Walt had made coffee in the little break room, the way he did every morning. At 67, Walt Brooks moved more slowly than he used to, especially since his hip replacement last year, but he still insisted on helping around the shop when he could. "How's Maya doing?" Walt asked, handing Evan a steaming mug. "Don't know yet," Evan replied. "I hope she's okay." Walt studied his nephew's face. "You did good last night, son. Real good." Evan shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. He'd done what anyone would have done. What anyone should have done. At 8:15, Arthur's black truck pulled into the parking lot. Through the office window, Evan watched his boss sit in the cab for a long moment before getting out. Arthur was carrying a white envelope in his hand. The shop's front door chimed as Arthur entered. 2 regular customers, Mr. Peterson and Mrs. Garcia, were already waiting in the small lobby area with coffee and yesterday's newspaper. "Morning, Arthur," Mr. Peterson called out. "Heard there was some excitement last night on County Road 9. Arthur nodded stiffly. "That's right." He looked around the shop until he spotted Evan at the service counter. "Evan, could I see you for a minute?" Evan set down his coffee and walked over. Arthur was holding the white envelope, and his face was hard to read. "I want to thank you again for what you did for Maya," Arthur said, his voice loud enough for the customers to hear. "She's fine, by the way. No injuries." "I'm glad to hear it," Evan said. Arthur held out the envelope. "This is just a small token of my appreciation." Evan looked at the envelope but didn't take it. That's not necessary, Mr. Coleman. I insist. Arthur's voice had an edge to it now. The customers were listening to every word. Mrs. Garcia had put down her newspaper and was watching with obvious interest. The thing is, Arthur continued, his tone getting sharper, I've been thinking about what happened, about boundaries, about what's appropriate. Evan felt his stomach tighten. Sir? You had no business getting involved with my daughter, Arthur said. I don't care what the circumstances were. There are boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. The words hit Evan like a physical blow. The customers were staring now, and he could feel his face getting hot. I was helping someone in danger, Evan said quietly. Were you? Arthur's voice was cold. Or were you looking for an opportunity? A way to get close to someone who's out of your league? The unfairness of it took Evan's breath away. He'd risked his own safety to help Maya, and now Arthur was making it sound like he'd had some kind of plan. I think, Arthur said, that it would be best if you found work somewhere else, effective immediately. The silence in the shop was deafening. Mrs. Garcia's coffee cup rattled against her saucer as she set it down. Mr. Peterson was staring at his newspaper like he was reading the most fascinating article ever written. Evan felt like the ground had shifted under his feet. This was his job, his livelihood, the way he paid rent and helped with Uncle Walt's medical bills. Arthur held out the envelope again. This should help you while you look for something else. Evan looked at the envelope for a long moment. Then he looked at Arthur's face, at the mixture of guilt and determination he saw there. I can't take this, Evan said finally. He turned and walked to the service counter where he'd left his keys to the shop. He picked them up and placed them next to the cash register. Then he walked out into the parking lot where a light drizzle was starting to fall. Behind him, he heard Arthur say to the customers, "Sometimes you have to protect what matters most." Evan climbed into his truck and sat there for a moment, his hands shaking with anger and hurt. Through the shop window, he could see Arthur still holding the white envelope. Evan started his truck and drove away. He didn't look back. Maya woke up in her apartment that morning feeling sore and tired. The doctor had given her a clean bill of health, but her body still felt the effects of the crash. More than that, though, she felt unsettled about something she couldn't quite name. Riley knocked on her door at 10 o'clock, carrying a bag from the bakery and a copy of the local newspaper. "How are you feeling?" Riley asked, giving Maya a careful hug. "Physically? Fine? Emotionally? I'm not sure." Maya poured coffee for both of them, while Riley spread the newspaper on the kitchen table. "Look at this," Riley said, pointing to a small article on the second page. The headline read, "Local Mechanic Saves Hospital Worker in Highway Incident." The article was only 3 paragraphs long, but it managed to make the rescue sound both heroic and slightly suspicious. The writer had included a quote from an unnamed source, questioning whether the whole thing might have been staged. "Staged?" Maya said, reading the article twice. "What does that mean?" Riley shook her head. "Small-town gossip. People always have to find something wrong with a good story." Maya thought about Evan Brooks, the calm way he'd handled the situation, the gentleness in his voice, the respectful distance he'd kept. Nothing about his behavior had seemed staged or calculating. "I need to talk to my father," Maya said. She drove to Arthur's Auto and Tire just after lunch, expecting to find the shop busy with its usual Tuesday afternoon customers. Instead, she found her father alone in his office, staring at a white envelope on his desk. "Dad?" Maya knocked on the open door. "Can we talk?" Arthur looked up, and Maya was surprised by how tired he looked. "Of course, honey. Come in." Maya sat in the chair across from his desk. "I wanted to thank you for coming to the hospital so quickly last night." "You're my daughter," Arthur said simply. "Of course I came." "I also wanted to talk to you about Evan Brooks." Arthur's expression hardened. "What about him?" "I want to make sure you thanked him properly. He saved my life, Dad." "I did thank him," Arthur said, "and I made it clear that his services are no longer needed here." Maya stared at her father. "What do you mean?" "I fired him this morning." "You fired him?" Maya's voice rose. "Why would you do that?" Arthur stood up and walked to the window. "There are boundaries, Maya. Lines that shouldn't be crossed. I can't have someone working for me who might have ulterior motives regarding my family." "Ulterior motives?" Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Dad, he helped me. He didn't even know who I was." Didn't he? Arthur turned back to face her. How do we know this whole thing wasn't planned? How do we know he didn't tamper with your brakes to create an opportunity to play hero? The accusation hung in the air between them. Maya felt like she'd been slapped. You don't really believe that, she said. Arthur was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, but no less firm. I believe in protecting our family name, in maintaining our reputation in this community. I've worked too hard to build what we have to let someone take advantage of us. Maya stood up slowly. So you fired a man who saved your daughter's life because you're worried about what people might think? I'm protecting you, Arthur said. From what? From someone who helped me. Arthur walked back to his desk and picked up the white envelope. I offered him money to make this go away quietly. He wouldn't take it. Maybe because he's not the kind of person who can be bought off, Maya said. Maybe because he actually is a good man who did a good thing. Arthur's jaw tightened. Maya, you don't understand how the world works. You don't understand what people like that want from people like us. People like that? Maya's voice was dangerously quiet. What exactly do you mean by that, Dad? Arthur didn't answer, but Maya could see the truth in his face. This wasn't really about boundaries or ulterior motives. This was about something else entirely, something that made her stomach turn. I'm going home, Maya said, heading for the door. Maya, wait, she turned back. Fix this, Dad. Make it right. Then she walked out, leaving Arthur alone with his envelope and his fears. That afternoon, Evan sat at his kitchen table with Uncle Walt, trying to figure out how they were going to make ends meet. Evan had been putting away a little money each month, but not enough to last long without a job. Don't worry about me, Walt said, though they both knew his medication was expensive. We'll figure something out. Evan was making a list of odd jobs he could do when his phone buzzed with a text message from a number he didn't recognize. Your brakes. Something felt wrong. Please let me look safely. It was signed simply, Maya. Evan stared at the message for a long moment, then he looked at Uncle Walt, who was reading it over his shoulder. Well, Walt said, that's interesting. I shouldn't get involved, Evan said. Her father already thinks I'm some kind of con artist. But if something was really wrong with her brakes, Walt said. Evan knew his uncle was right. If Maya's brake failure hadn't been an accident, then she was still in danger. And if it had been intentional, then someone wanted it to look like Evan was responsible. He typed back, tomorrow afternoon, neutral location? The response came quickly. Yes, thank you. Evan put down his phone and looked at his uncle. I have a feeling things are about to get complicated. Walt smiled. Son, when you're doing the right thing, it's always complicated. The next afternoon, Evan drove to a small rented service bay behind Miller's old lawnmower repair shop. The building had been empty for months, but the owner let people use the bay for $20 a day. It was the most neutral place Evan could think of. Maya arrived right on time, with Riley following in a separate car. Both women looked nervous but determined. Maya had changed out of her hospital scrubs into jeans and a sweater, and her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail. Thank you for doing this, Maya said as they walked toward the service bay. I need to see what happened too, Evan replied. If there was a problem with your brakes, other people could be in danger. Riley hung back near the cars while Evan and Maya examined her sedan. Evan was careful to explain everything he was doing, step by step. He didn't want there to be any question about his methods. First, we'll jack up the car and remove the front wheels, he said, pulling on work gloves. Then we can look at the brake lines and see what caused the failure. Maya watched closely as Evan worked. His movements were careful and precise, and he took photos of everything before making any changes. When he removed the first wheel, Evan immediately saw the problem. There, he said, pointing to a brake line near the wheel. Do you see that mark? Maya leaned in closer. There was a deep scratch in the metal brake line, right near a small clip that held it in place. That's not normal wear, Evan said grimly. That scratch is fresh, and it's in exactly the right place to cause a slow leak. Eventually, all your brake fluid would have drained out. Maya's face went pale. You mean someone did this on purpose? It looks that way, Evan said. He took several photos of the scratched line from different angles. The question is who had access to your car recently. Riley walked over to join them. Maya, Who has keys to your car besides you? Maya thought for a moment. Just my spare key. I keep it in my apartment, but she trailed off, looking uncomfortable. But what? Evan asked gently. Landon Pierce, my ex-boyfriend. He had the spare key for about 6 months when we were dating. I never asked for it back when we broke up. Evan and Riley exchanged glances. When did you break up? Riley asked. 3 months ago, but he's been calling me lately, asking to get back together. Does he know about cars? Evan asked. Maya nodded reluctantly. His father owns Pierce Realty, but Landon always liked working on cars. He used to help me with oil changes and things like that. Evan carefully photographed the brake line damage from every possible angle. Then he helped Maya put the wheel back on her car. We need to be smart about this, he said as they finished up. If someone really did tamper with your brakes, they might try again. And if they wanted to make me look guilty, they might try to frame you for it, Maya finished. Riley spoke up. What do we do now? We gather evidence, Evan said, but we do it carefully, and we don't accuse anyone of anything until we're sure. As they prepared to leave, Maya turned to Evan. I owe you an apology for what my father said and did. Evan shook his head. You don't owe me anything. You're not responsible for your father's actions. Still, Maya said, it wasn't right, and I want you to know that not everyone in my family thinks that way. That evening, Evan went to the Sunrise Diner for dinner. Uncle Walt had insisted on cooking, but Evan needed some time to think. The diner was nearly empty except for Mrs. Bernice Hall, an older black woman who sang alto in the church choir and seemed to know everything that happened in town. Evan Brooks, she called out from her corner booth. Come sit with me, honey. Evan hesitated. He wasn't in the mood for small talk, but Mrs. Hall had always been kind to him. He slid into the booth across from her. I heard about what happened with Arthur Coleman, she said without preamble. Heard about the rescue, too. People are talking. What kind of talking? Evan asked. Mrs. Hall stirred sugar into her coffee. Oh, you know how folks get. Some say you're a hero. Others say the whole thing seems convenient. There's even talk that you might have caused the problem yourself to look good. Evan's jaw tightened. And what do you think? Mrs. Hall looked at him with sharp, knowing eyes. I think a man who stages a rescue to impress a woman doesn't refuse money when it's offered. I think Arthur Coleman is scared of something, and it's not what people might think of his daughter. Before Evan could ask what she meant, Mrs. Hall changed the subject. How's your Uncle Walt doing? I heard he might need surgery on that hip again. We're hoping to avoid that, Evan said. The medication is helping for now. Mrs. Hall nodded. Medical bills are expensive. I hope losing your job won't make things too hard. The kindness in her voice almost undid him. We'll manage, Evan said. I'm sure you will, Mrs. Hall replied. Good people always find a way. That same evening, Maya sat in her apartment trying to focus on a medical journal, but her mind kept wandering. She kept thinking about the scratched brake line and what it meant. Someone had tried to hurt her, maybe even kill her. Her phone rang and she saw her father's name on the screen. Hi, Dad. Maya, I want you to come to dinner tomorrow night. The Pierces are coming over. Maya's stomach clenched. Dad, I don't think that's a good idea. Landon specifically asked about you. He's concerned about the accident. I bet he is, Maya muttered. What was that? Nothing. Dad, I really don't want to have dinner with Landon. Arthur's voice got that stubborn tone she knew so well. Maya, Landon Pierce is a good man from a good family. His father is one of my best customers. You could do a lot worse. I could do a lot better too, Maya said. There was a long pause. This isn't about that mechanic, is it? Maya closed her eyes. His name is Evan Brooks, and this is about me wanting to make my own choices about who I spend time with. Just come to dinner, Arthur said. One dinner, for me. Maya knew that tone. Her father wasn't going to give up until she agreed. Fine, one dinner, but I'm not promising to be pleasant. The next morning, Evan drove to Holland Auto Supply to see if he could learn anything about the brake parts on Maya's car. The store was busy with contractors picking up supplies for morning jobs. Evan waited until there was a break in the line, then approached the parts counter. Jimmy Holland, the owner's son, was working the register. Hey, Evan, Jimmy said. Sorry to hear about what happened at Arthur's place. Thanks, Evan said. Listen, I'm trying to track down a specific brake part, a brake line clip for a 2018 Honda Accord. Do you carry those? Jimmy checked his computer. Yeah, we've got them. It's not a common part, though. Most people don't need to replace those clips unless they're doing major brake work. Have you sold any recently? Jimmy scrolled through his records. Actually, yeah, someone bought one 2 days ago. Cash sale. Do you remember who? No, but I can check the security camera footage if it's important. Why? Evan thought carefully about how much to reveal. There might have been some tampering with the brake system. I'm just trying to figure out what happened. Jimmy's expression grew serious. I'll check the footage tonight after we close. Can you come by tomorrow? I'll be here, Evan said. That evening, Maya reluctantly drove to her father's house for dinner with the Pierce family. The house felt stuffy and formal, with catered food laid out on the good china. Landon Pierce was already there when she arrived, looking polished and confident in his expensive suit. Maya, Landon stood up to greet her with a hug that lasted too long. I was so worried when I heard about your accident. Thank you, Maya said stiffly, pulling away. Landon's father, Robert Pierce, owned half the commercial real estate in town. He was a large man with a loud voice and strong opinions about everything. Terrible thing, Robert boomed. You just can't trust these foreign cars. Should have bought American. The car's fine, Maya said. It was just a mechanical failure. Still, Landon said, you have to be more careful. Maybe you shouldn't be driving alone at night on those back roads. Something in his tone made Maya look at him sharply. I can take care of myself. Of course you can, Landon said quickly. I just worry about you. During dinner, Arthur regaled the Pierces with stories about his business and the important clients he served. Landon kept trying to steer the conversation toward Maya's work at the hospital and their shared memories from when they dated. Remember that time I had to come pick you up when your car wouldn't start? Landon said with a charming smile. Good thing I knew your car so well. I probably know it better than you do. Maya's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. What did you say? Just that I used to help you with car trouble all the time. I know that Honda inside and out. Maya set down her fork. You certainly do. After dinner, Landon walked Maya out to her car. The night was warm, with crickets singing in the bushes around her father's driveway. Maya, Landon said, stepping closer to her. I've been thinking about us a lot lately. Landon, we've talked about this. We're not getting back together. But why not? We were good together. We make sense. Maya unlocked her car door, but Landon put his hand on it, preventing her from opening it. I can keep you safe, he said, his voice low. Let me take care of you. There was something possessive in his tone that made Maya's skin crawl. I don't need you to take care of me. She pulled the door open, forcing Landon to step back. As she got in the car, she noticed him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Driving home, Maya's hands shook on the steering wheel. Landon's comment about knowing her car, inside and out, kept echoing in her mind. Combined with his comment about keeping her safe, it felt like a threat disguised as concern. The next day, Evan met Maya at the Sunset Diner for lunch. The little restaurant was quiet in the afternoon, with only a few customers scattered among the worn vinyl booths. Jimmy Holland is going to check the security footage tonight, Evan told Maya as they sat in a back booth. He said someone bought the exact type of brake clip that would fit your car 2 days before the accident. Maya nodded, stirring her coffee absently. I had dinner with Landon last night. Evan tried not to react to that news, but he felt something tighten in his chest. How did that go? He said some things that bothered me, Maya said. She told Evan about Landon's comments about knowing her car and keeping her safe. That could be innocent, Evan said, though he didn't believe it. Maybe, but Riley found something else. Maya pulled out her phone and showed Evan a photo. This is from a barbecue last summer. Look what Landon's holding. In the photo, Landon was grinning at the camera and holding up a car key. The caption read, Chauffeur duty. My spare key, Maya said. He used to joke about being my personal driver when we were together. Evan studied the photo, so he definitely had access to your car. And he knows enough about cars to tamper with the brakes, Maya added. The question is, would he really do something like that? Before Evan could answer, his phone rang. It was Jimmy Holland. Evan, you need to see this footage, Jimmy said without preamble. Can you come down to the store? 20 minutes later, Evan and Maya stood in the small office behind Holland Auto Supply, watching grainy security camera footage on Jimmy's computer. There, Jimmy said, pointing at the screen. That's the guy who bought the brake clip. The figure on the screen was wearing a baseball cap pulled low, but when he turned to hand money to the cashier, his profile was clearly visible. It was Landon Pierce. That's him, Maya whispered. That's definitely Landon. Jimmy printed out several clear screenshots and handed them to Evan. I can make you copies of the receipt too. He paid cash, but the timestamp shows exactly when he was here. Outside the auto parts store, Maya and Evan sat in their cars with the windows down, processing what they'd just learned. So now we know, Maya said. Now we know, Evan agreed. The question is, what do we do about it? Maya was quiet for a long moment. I want to confront him. I want to hear him admit it. That could be dangerous, Evan said. If he was willing to tamper with your brakes, what else might he do? I won't be alone with him, Maya promised. But I need to know why. I need to understand why he would do something like this. Evan wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in Maya's face. If you're going to do this, do it somewhere public, and maybe record the conversation. I will, Maya said. And Evan? After this is over, I want to talk to my father. He needs to know the truth about what happened, and he needs to apologize to you. Evan nodded, though he wasn't sure Arthur Coleman would see it that way. That evening, Evan worked alone in the rented service bay, restoring an old car radio that had been in Maya's glove compartment. It was a vintage model from the 1980s, and someone had clearly loved it once. Now the wiring was corroded and the speakers were blown, but Evan could see the quality underneath the damage. Uncle Walt had taught him to repair electronics when Evan was young. Everything can be fixed, Walt used to say. You just have to be patient and gentle with it. Evan carefully soldered new wires and cleaned the circuit boards. As he worked, he thought about Maya and the courage it had taken for her to pursue the truth about her accident. He thought about Arthur Coleman and the fear that had driven him to make such a terrible mistake. He thought about Landon Pierce and the kind of entitled anger that would lead someone to hurt the person they claimed to love. Around 8 o'clock, Maya appeared in the doorway of the service bay. "Hi," she said softly. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by." "Not at all," Evan said, setting down his soldering iron. "How are you doing?" "Better, I think. I called Landon and asked him to meet me for coffee tomorrow afternoon." Evan nodded. "Are you sure you want to do this?" "I'm sure." Maya walked over to see what he was working on. "Is that my radio?" I hope you don't mind. I found it in your glove compartment after the accident. It looked like it had sentimental value." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "It was my mother's. She died when I was 16, and this radio was always playing in our kitchen. I've been trying to find someone to fix it for years." Evan turned on the radio, and soft music filled the service bay. It was an old soul station, the kind of music that made you want to slow dance. "It's not perfect yet," Evan said, "but it works." Maya wiped her eyes. "Thank you. This means more to me than you know." They stood there listening to the music, not talking, just being present with each other. For a moment, all the complications and fears faded away. "Evan," Maya said finally, after tomorrow, after I talk to Landon and get this sorted out with my father, would you like to have dinner? Somewhere that's not about investigations or brake parts or family drama?" Evan smiled. "I'd like that very much." "Good," Maya said, "because despite everything that's happened, I think you're a good man, and I'd like to get to know you better when our lives aren't falling apart." As Maya drove home that night, her mother's radio played softly in the car. For the first time since the accident, she felt like things might actually work out. Tomorrow, she would confront Landon and learn the truth. Then, she would deal with her father. And after that, maybe she could start building something new with a man who had proven himself to be honest and brave when it mattered most. The music carried her home through the quiet streets, and for the first time in days, Maya allowed herself to hope. The next afternoon, Maya sat at a small table outside Riverside Cafe, watching people walk by on the tree-lined street. She'd chosen this spot carefully, public, busy, but with enough privacy for a serious conversation. Her phone was in her purse, already recording. Landon arrived exactly on time, looking confident in his pressed khakis and polo shirt. He'd always been particular about his appearance, but today there was something different about him, something that made Maya's skin crawl. "You look beautiful," he said, leaning down to kiss her cheek before she could stop him. Landon, sit down. We need to talk. He settled into the chair across from her, signaling the waitress for coffee. I'm so glad you called. I've been hoping we could work things out. Maya took a deep breath. I know what you did to my car. Landon's smile never wavered, but something flickered in his eyes. What do you mean? The brake line, the clip you bought from Holland Auto Supply. I know it was you. For a long moment, Landon just stared at her. Then he laughed, but it sounded forced. Maya, that's crazy. Why would I do something like that? That's what I want to know. The waitress brought Landon's coffee, and he took his time adding cream and sugar. When she was gone, he leaned forward across the small table. You really think I would hurt you? He asked, his voice softer now. I think you would do anything to get what you want, Maya said, including making me depend on you. Landon was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee. When he looked up, his mask had slipped slightly. You were never supposed to get hurt, he said finally. It was just supposed to slow you down, make you realize you needed someone to take care of you. Maya's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. So you admit it? I loosened the clip a little bit, just enough to cause a slow leak. You were supposed to notice the soft brake pedal and pull over safely. Then I would have come to help you. But that's not what happened. Landon's face hardened. No, because that mechanic had to play hero. Everything would have been fine if he hadn't interfered. Maya stared at him in disbelief. Landon, I could have died. If Evan hadn't been there, I would have crashed. But you didn't crash, Landon said, as if that made everything okay. And now everyone thinks he's some kind of hero, when really, I'm the one who loves you. This isn't love, Maya said, her voice shaking with anger. This is control. This is manipulation. Landon reached across the table to grab her hand, but she pulled it away. Maya, please. I was trying to protect you. You don't understand how dangerous it is for you to be involved with someone like that. Someone like what? You know what I mean, Landon said, his voice dropping. Someone who doesn't understand our world, our responsibilities. Maya felt sick. Our world. Look, I'm not prejudiced, Landon said quickly, but there are realities, social expectations. Your father understands. That's why he fired the guy. My father was wrong, and so are you. Landon's expression grew desperate. Maya, I can give you everything. Security, status, a real future. What can he give you? A life of struggling to make ends meet, having people look down on you? He can give me honesty, Maya said, standing up from the table. He can give me respect. He can give me love that doesn't require me to be someone I'm not. You're making a mistake, Landon called after her as she walked away. You'll regret this. Maya didn't turn around. She got in her car and drove straight to her father's office, her hands shaking so hard she could barely grip the steering wheel. Arthur Coleman was reviewing invoices when Maya burst into his office. One look at her face told him something serious had happened. Maya, what's wrong? Maya set her phone on his desk and played the recording of her conversation with Landon. Arthur's face went pale as he listened to Landon's confession. He could have killed you, Arthur whispered when the recording ended. Yes, and you fired the man who saved my life because you thought he wasn't good enough for our family. Arthur slumped in his chair, suddenly looking much older than his 56 years. I was trying to protect you. From what? From someone who actually cares about me? Arthur struggled with the words. From people judging you, from making your life harder. Maya sat down across from her father. Dad, do you hear yourself? You were willing to destroy a good man's life because you're worried about what other people might think. Arthur was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. When I was your age, I dated a white girl named Susan. I thought I loved her, and I thought she loved me. But when it came time to meet her family, she made it clear that I wasn't good enough, said her father would never accept a black man. Maya had never heard this story before. Dad, I swore I would never let my child go through that kind of rejection, that I would protect you from that pain. So you decided to cause that pain instead? Arthur looked up at her with tears in his eyes. I was wrong, wasn't I? Yes, Dad. You were wrong. They sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Arthur asked. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to make this right," Maya said, publicly. "Evan deserves an apology, and this town deserves to know the truth." That evening, Evan was eating a quiet dinner with Uncle Walt when his phone rang. It was Maya. "How did it go?" he asked. He confessed, "I have it all on recording." Maya's voice was tired but relieved. "And I talked to my father." "How did that go?" "Better than I expected. He wants to make things right." Evan felt a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying start to lift from his shoulders. "What happens now?" "I don't know," Maya said honestly, "but I know I want to find out with you." The next morning was Sunday, and Evan rarely missed church services at First Baptist. Uncle Walt had been going there for 30 years, and the congregation had become like family to both of them. Evan slipped into his usual pew near the back with Uncle Walt beside him. Riley Chen was sitting with Maya a few rows ahead, and Evan tried not to notice how beautiful Maya looked in her blue dress. The service proceeded normally through the opening hymn and the scripture reading. But when it came time for announcements, Pastor Williams looked out over the congregation with a serious expression. "Before we continue," the pastor said, "Arthur Coleman has asked to speak to the congregation." Arthur stood up from his seat in the third row and walked to the front of the church. Evan could see that his hands were shaking slightly. "Many of you know," Arthur began, his voice carrying clearly through the sanctuary, "that my daughter Maya was in a car accident this past week. Many of you also know that she was helped by Evan Brooks, who worked for me." Arthur paused and looked directly at Evan. "I owe this congregation an apology, and I owe Evan Brooks a much bigger apology." The church was completely silent. Even the babies seemed to sense that something important was happening. "I let my fear and my pride cloud my judgment," Arthur continued. "I accused a good man of having bad motives when he had risked his own safety to save my daughter's life. I fired him not because he did anything wrong, but because I was afraid of what people might think." Arthur's voice broke slightly. "I was wrong. I was wrong about Evan, and I was wrong about what matters in this life. Evan Brooks is a man of integrity and courage, and I ask this congregation to forgive me for the harm I've done to his reputation." The silence stretched for several long seconds. Then, Mrs. Bernice Hall's rich alto voice called out from the middle of the church, "Amen." The word seemed to release something in the congregation. Other voices joined in. "Amen. That's right. God forgive us all." Arthur walked down the aisle toward Evan's pew. Evan stood up as Arthur approached, not sure what to expect. Arthur stopped in front of him and extended his hand. "I'm sorry, son. I'm truly sorry." Evan shook his hand. "Apology accepted, Mr. Coleman." Arthur hesitated for a moment, then pulled Evan into an awkward but heartfelt embrace. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for saving my daughter." After the service, Arthur asked Evan to come by his office that afternoon. Uncle Walt insisted on coming along, saying he wanted to make sure the terms were fair. "I want to offer you your job back," Arthur said once they were seated in his office, "with a raise and better benefits." Evan considered the offer. "I appreciate that, Mr. Coleman, but I don't need the raise." Arthur looked surprised. "Son, you deserve more than I was paying you." "What I deserve," Evan said carefully, "is respect and fair treatment. If you can promise me that, then I'll come back to work for you." "You have my word," Arthur said solemnly. "Then I accept. But I have some conditions." Arthur nodded. "Name them." "I want clear boundaries about personal matters. What happens between me and Maya is between us. It has nothing to do with my work performance." "Agreed." "And I want Uncle Walt to be able to continue using the shop's health insurance program. His medical bills are expensive." Arthur looked at the older man with new respect. "Of course. Whatever he needs." As they worked out the details, Evan began to see a different side of Arthur Coleman. Underneath the pride and fear was a man who genuinely loved his daughter and wanted to do right by the people around him. That evening, Maya invited Evan to dinner at her father's house. It was a simple meal: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, but the atmosphere was warm and genuine. Arthur made an effort to get to know Evan as a person rather than just an employee. He asked about Evan's background, his hopes for the future, his relationship with Uncle Walt. Maya could see him slowly recognizing what she had seen from the beginning, that Evan was a man of character. Riley stopped by after dinner with a homemade pie, and soon the kitchen was filled with comfortable conversation and laughter. When Arthur shared a funny story from Maya's childhood, she threw a dinner roll at him, and for a moment they were just a family, enjoying each other's company. "I should get going," Evan said finally, as the evening wound down. Arthur stood up from the table. "Evan, I want you to know that you're welcome here any time, as family." The word hung in the air, full of meaning and promise. "Thank you, sir," Evan said. "That means a lot." Maya walked Evan out to his truck. The night was clear and warm, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "How are you feeling about everything?" she asked. "Good," Evan said. "Really good. Your father is a better man than I thought." "He just needed to get past his fear," Maya said. "We all do, I think." Evan turned to face her. "Maya, I want you to know that I don't take any of this lightly. Your friendship, your family's acceptance, it matters to me." "Good," Maya said softly, "because it matters to me too." They were standing close now, and Evan could smell her perfume, could see the way the porch light caught the highlights in her hair. "Would you like to go for a drive?" Maya asked suddenly. "There's a place I want to show you." 20 minutes later, they were parked at an overlook above the river. The water reflected the lights from town, creating a shimmering pathway across the dark surface. Maya had brought her mother's radio, and it played softly while they sat on the tailgate of Evan's truck, talking about everything and nothing. "I've been thinking about what you said," Maya told him, "about not taking things lightly." "Yeah? I don't take it lightly either, any of it. But I also don't want to live my life being afraid of what might go wrong." Evan looked at her profile in the moonlight. "What are you saying?" Maya turned to meet his eyes. "I'm saying that I like you, Evan Brooks. I like your integrity and your kindness and the way you make me feel safe without making me feel helpless." "I like you too," Evan said quietly. "More than I should probably admit right now." Maya smiled. "Why? Because it's too soon? Because it's complicated? Because people might not approve?" "Because I want to do this right," Evan said. "I want to earn the right to be in your life." Maya reached over and took his hand. "You already have." They sat there holding hands while the radio played and the river flowed beneath them, both of them understanding that something important was beginning. Something worth fighting for. Something worth the risk. When Evan drove Maya home an hour later, neither of them wanted the evening to end. But they also both understood that the best things in life were worth waiting for, worth building slowly and carefully. "Tomorrow?" Maya asked as she got out of his truck. "Tomorrow," Evan agreed. As Maya watched him drive away, she felt lighter than she had in months. The truth was finally out. Her father was making amends, and she was free to explore her feelings for a man who had proven himself worthy of her trust. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, everything felt possible. 3 weeks later, Maya's life had settled into a new rhythm. Evan was back at work at Arthur's Auto and Tire, and the tension that had filled the shop after the incident was slowly dissipating. Arthur made a point of treating Evan with the respect he deserved, and word had spread through town about what really happened the night of the accident. Landon Pierce had quietly left town after his father found out about the brake tampering. Robert Pierce had been horrified by his son's actions and had insisted Landon get professional help. Maya felt sorry for the family, but she was relieved not to have to worry about running into Landon around town. On a warm Friday evening, Maya finished her shift at the hospital and drove to the Riverside Park where she was meeting Evan for a picnic. He was already there when she arrived, sitting on a blanket under an old oak tree with a basket beside him. "How was your day?" he asked, standing to greet her with a gentle hug. "Busy, but good." Maya settled onto the blanket beside him. "Mrs. Patterson had her baby this morning, a little girl, 8 pounds, 2 ounces. Evan unpacked sandwiches and iced tea from the basket. "That's the 3rd baby this month, isn't it?" "4th. Riley says it's something in the water." They ate as the sun began to set over the river, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Maya had brought her mother's radio, which now worked perfectly thanks to Evan's patient restoration. Soft jazz played while they talked about their plans for the weekend. "Uncle Walt wants to take you fishing," Evan said. "He's been asking about it for days." Maya laughed. "I've never been fishing in my life." "That's what I told him. He said it's never too late to learn." Your uncle is a wise man. He likes you, Evan said. He told me yesterday that you're good for me. Maya felt warmth spread through her chest. What do you think? Evan reached over and took her hand. I think he's right. I think you make me want to be the best version of myself. You make me feel brave, Maya said quietly, like I can trust my own judgment about what makes me happy. They were sitting closer now, and Maya could see the way the fading light caught the gold flecks in Evan's green eyes. Over the past 3 weeks, they had been careful with each other, taking time to build trust and understanding, but Maya felt ready for something more. Evan, she said softly. Yeah? I want you to know that I'm not afraid anymore. Of my father's opinions, of what people might say, of getting hurt. I know what I want. Evan's thumb traced over her knuckles. What do you want? This, Maya said, gesturing between them. You, us, whatever that looks like. Evan leaned forward and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. Are you sure? I'm sure. When Evan kissed her, it was gentle and sure, like everything else about him. Maya felt something settle into place in her chest, a sense of rightness she'd never experienced before. I love you, Evan whispered against her lips. I think I've loved you since that first night on the road. I love you too, Maya whispered back. I was just too scared to admit it. The next morning, Maya woke up to her phone ringing. It was her father, calling earlier than usual. Good morning, Dad. Morning, sweetheart. I hope I'm not calling too early. Maya glanced at the clock. It was barely 8 o'clock on a Saturday, which was early for Arthur. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. I was just wondering if you and Evan would like to come to dinner tomorrow night. I'm making my famous barbecue ribs. Maya smiled. Over the past few weeks, Arthur had been making an obvious effort to include Evan in family activities. That sounds wonderful. I'll ask him. Good. And Maya? Yes? Arthur was quiet for a moment. I'm proud of you, of the woman you've become, of the choices you're making. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, Dad. That means everything to me. After they hung up, Maya lay in bed thinking about how much had changed in just a few weeks. Her relationship with her father was stronger than it had ever been. She was falling in love with a man who respected and cherished her. And for the first time in her adult life, she felt like she was living authentically, making choices based on her own values rather than other people's expectations. Around noon, Maya drove to the hardware store to pick up some supplies for a project at the hospital. As she was loading bags into her car, she heard a familiar voice behind her. Maya Coleman. She turned to see Mrs. Bernice Hall approaching with a warm smile. Mrs. Hall, how nice to see you. How are you doing, honey? I heard you and that young man of yours are getting along well. Maya felt her cheeks warm. We are. Thank you for asking. Mrs. Hall's expression grew more serious. I want you to know how proud I am of you and your father. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong and make it right. Thank you. That means a lot. Love is a precious thing, Mrs. Hall continued. When you find the real thing, you hold on to it tight. Don't let fear or pride or other people's small-mindedness get in the way. Maya nodded, thinking of her own journey over the past month. I won't. I promise. Mrs. Hall patted Maya's arm gently. Good girl. Now, when are you going to bring that young man to church with you? I want to get to know him better. This Sunday, actually. He and his uncle usually attend First Baptist, but they have agreed to visit our church this week. Wonderful. I'll make sure to introduce him around properly. As Maya drove home, she thought about Mrs. Hall's words. Love was precious, and she had found something real with Evan, something worth protecting and nurturing. Sunday morning found Maya and Evan sitting together in the pew at Mount Olive Baptist Church, where Maya had attended since childhood. Uncle Walt had begged off, claiming his hip was bothering him, but Maya suspected he wanted to give them some alone time. The service was familiar and comforting, with spirited singing and a sermon about forgiveness and second chances. Pastor Johnson spoke about how God's grace allowed people to move past their mistakes and build something better. After the service, several church members approached to introduce themselves to Evan. Maya watched with pride as he charmed the elderly ladies with his polite manners and engaged the men in conversations about work and community service. Your young man has good character, Mrs. Williams told Maya as they stood in the fellowship hall sharing coffee and homemade cookies. You can see it in the way he treats people. I think so too, Maya agreed. Arthur arrived just as the crowd was beginning to thin out. He'd attended early service at his own church, then driven over to pick up Maya and Evan for their barbecue dinner. Ready to go? Arthur asked. I've got ribs that have been smoking since dawn. The drive to Arthur's house was comfortable, with easy conversation about the sermon and plans for the coming week. Maya noticed how naturally Evan and her father talked now, without the awkward tension that had marked their early interactions. Arthur's backyard was set up with picnic tables and string lights. Riley arrived shortly after they did, bringing potato salad and her infectious laugh. Uncle Walt showed up despite his earlier protests, claiming the smell of barbecue had drawn him from his recliner. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Maya looked around at the people she loved most in the world. Her father was telling Uncle Walt a story about his army days. Riley was helping Evan fix a wobbly table leg. Everything felt right in a way she'd never experienced before. You look happy, Arthur said, appearing beside her with a plate of food. I am happy, Maya said, really, truly happy. Arthur nodded, watching as Evan patiently showed Riley how to properly tighten a screw. He's a good man, Maya. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. People can change, Dad. People can grow. Yes, Arthur said quietly. They can. As the sun began to set, Uncle Walt declared that the evening needed music. Arthur disappeared into the house and returned with an old Bluetooth speaker, which he connected to Maya's phone. Play something from that radio of yours, Walt suggested. Maya found the same jazz station her mother used to listen to, and soon the backyard was filled with the smooth sounds of Miles Davis and John Coltrane. Uncle Walt asked Riley to dance, which made everyone laugh because he insisted on leading despite his bad hip. Would you like to dance? Evan asked Maya, extending his hand. They swayed together under the string lights while their families watched with warm smiles. Maya felt surrounded by love and acceptance in a way she'd never imagined possible. Thank you, she whispered to Evan. For what? For being brave enough to help a stranger on a rainy night, for being patient with my father, for showing me what real love looks like. Evan spun her gently, then pulled her back into his arms. Thank you for being worth it. As the song ended, Arthur raised his beer bottle in a toast. To second chances, he said, and to love that's stronger than fear. To second chances, everyone echoed. Later that night, Maya and Evan drove to their favorite spot by the river. The radio played softly while they sat on the tailgate of his truck, watching the moonlight dance on the water. I've been thinking about the future, Maya said. Oh yeah? What about it? Maya turned to look at him. I want you in it, for as long as you'll have me. Evan smiled and pulled her closer. That's going to be a very long time. Promise? Promise. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the radio and the gentle sound of water flowing over rocks. Maya thought about her mother, who had died too young but had taught her daughter to value love over everything else. She thought about the courage it had taken to follow her heart, despite her father's initial objections. She thought about the man beside her, who had proven himself worthy of her trust in every possible way. Evan? I think my mother would have liked you. Evan kissed the top of her head. I hope so. I would have liked to meet her. She used to say that the right person would make you feel like the best version of yourself, like you could do anything. Is that how I make you feel? Maya smiled up at him. Every single day. A slow song began to play on the radio, one of those timeless ballads that spoke of enduring love and unshakable commitment. Maya closed her eyes and let the music wash over her, feeling grateful for the winding road that had led her to this moment. She thought about the scared young woman she'd been just a few weeks ago, terrified of disappointing her father and trapped by other people's expectations. That woman felt like a stranger now. In her place was someone who knew her own mind, who had the courage to fight for what mattered, who understood that real love was built on honesty and respect rather than control and fear. What are you thinking about? Evan asked. How different everything is now. How different I am. You're not different, Evan said gently. You're just finally free to be yourself." Maya knew he was right. She had always been strong and independent and kind. She had just needed to find the courage to let those qualities shine without apology. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too." As they drove home through the quiet streets of their small town, Maya felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. There would be challenges ahead, she knew. Life was never simple or easy, but she also knew that whatever came, she and Evan would face it together with honesty and courage and the kind of love that made everything else possible. The radio played her mother's favorite song as they pulled into Maya's driveway. Evan walked her to the door, kissed her goodnight, and promised to call her in the morning. Maya stood on her front porch, watching his taillights disappear around the corner, her heart full of hope and possibility. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new opportunities to build the life she wanted with the man she loved. But tonight, she was simply grateful. Grateful for the accident that had brought Evan into her life. Grateful for her father's journey toward understanding and acceptance. Grateful for friends like Riley, who had stood by her through everything. Grateful for the courage to choose love over fear. As she unlocked her front door and stepped inside, Maya could still hear the faint sound of jazz music drifting from her car radio. The sound followed her into the house like a blessing, reminding her that some things, love, family, hope, second chances, were worth any struggle. She was home, in every sense of the word, and she was loved, completely and truly loved, for exactly who she was. It was more than enough. It was everything. 6 months later, Maya stood in the kitchen of the house she now shared with Evan and Uncle Walt, making coffee and listening to her mother's radio play the morning news. Through the window, she could see Evan in the backyard, patiently teaching Uncle Walt's grandson how to change the oil in an old lawnmower. Arthur stopped by most Sunday mornings now, sometimes bringing pastries from the bakery, always bringing stories and laughter. Riley was a regular fixture at their dinner table. Mrs. Bernice Hall had taken to calling Maya daughter and treating Evan like the grandson she'd never had. Their love story had become part of the town's folklore, the tale of a rainy night rescue that had led to something beautiful and lasting. People still talked about Arthur's public apology and the way it had changed him for the better. They talked about how love could overcome fear, how courage could transform communities, how second chances were always worth taking. As Maya watched Evan show the little boy how to check the oil level, she thought about the conversation they'd had the night before, about marriage and children and the future they wanted to build together, about the auto shop they hoped to own someday, and the family they planned to raise, and the love they would continue to choose every day for the rest of their lives. The radio played a song her mother had loved, and Maya smiled as she poured coffee into 3 mugs. Some stories, she thought, were worth telling again and again. Some love was strong enough to change everything, and some happy endings were really just beautiful beginnings.